It was April of 2015. I remember it like it was yesterday. My girlfriend Lily, my little brother Daniel, who was only 9 at the time, and I decided to go see a late-night showing at a small, quiet movie theater in our town. It was a Wednesday night, and we went late on purpose, hoping to get the entire theater to ourselves. That was kind of our thing. Lily and I loved horror movies, and with my Thursdays off from college that semester, it was the perfect chance to unwind. We were there to watch It Follows, and ironically, I didn't know how true that title would feel later. When we first walked into the theater, it was dim and quiet. At first, it seemed like we were the only ones inside, but then Daniel pointed. "Hey, there's someone up there," he whispered. Sure enough, there was a man in a dark gray hoodie sitting in the very top left corner. His posture was slouched, and his face was hard to make out in the dim light. It gave me a weird feeling for just a second, but then I brushed it off. It's not like it was unusual for someone to come watch a movie alone. We picked out seats in the upper middle row, right behind the railing, so we could prop our feet up. We spaced ourselves out for comfort. Daniel sat on one end, Lily sat in the middle, and I sat closest to the aisle. That meant I was also the closest to the man in the hoodie. The preview started playing, and a few minutes later, the lights in the theater dimmed completely. The only illumination came from the flickering images on the screen. Daniel noisily tore open a bag of candy he had smuggled in and started chewing obnoxiously loud. Lily and I both shushed him in unison. 5 minutes into the movie, over the crinkle of candy wrappers, I thought I heard a noise behind us. Something faint, like footsteps on the carpeted stairs. I glanced back casually. The man in the hoodie had moved down one row. It was a little strange, but I figured maybe he wanted a better view or angle. No big deal. Another 5 minutes passed. Then I heard it again. This time, it was more distinct. A faint scuffing sound, like someone brushing against a chair. I turned my head slowly so it wouldn't seem obvious. The man was a row closer now. A ripple of unease went through me. I leaned toward Lily and whispered, trying to sound nonchalant, "Don't look, but that guy keeps moving closer." She shrugged slightly, uninterested, and kept watching the movie. I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe he just couldn't find a comfortable seat. But I made up my mind. If he moved closer again, I was going to say something. 5 more minutes crawled by. This time, I didn't even hear him. I just turned my head instinctively. He was closer. Now only 3 rows behind us. And instead of staying at the edge of the row, he was sitting closer to the center, right behind us. His hood was up, and his head was bowed like he was staring at his lap. A chill ran down my spine. I felt his presence pressing into the back of my skull, like he was staring at us, even though his head was down. I whispered to Lily again. She turned slightly, caught sight of him, and gave me a concerned look. "Should we move?" she asked softly. I shook my head. Not yet. At that point, I could barely focus on the movie. My stomach felt tight, and my heart was thudding loudly in my chest. Part of me wanted to believe he was just a normal guy, that I was overthinking it. But then, without realizing, I turned around again. The man was now only 2 rows behind us, closer to the center, and his head was still angled downward, hidden by the hood. This time, I didn't care if it was awkward. I opened my mouth, ready to ask, "Hey, what are you doing?" But the words caught in my throat. I hesitated and stayed silent. I was only 16 at the time, skinny and not exactly intimidating. What if he reacted badly? My little brother stood up suddenly during a slower part of the movie. "I gotta pee," Daniel whispered as he scooted out. "Be quick," I told him. Less than a minute later, I turned again, this time fully determined to confront the man. But my breath caught in my throat. The row behind us was empty. The man was gone. I felt a cold, hollow dread spread through my chest. "Where is he?" I muttered. "Good," Lily whispered. "Maybe he left." But I wasn't convinced. A horrible thought flashed in my mind. "Daniel." I jumped to my feet and told Lily to wait there. I rushed out into the empty, dimly lit hallway. My heart was hammering so hard it felt like it might burst. That's when I saw him. The man in the gray hoodie. He was crouched down in front of the men's bathroom door. Then I realized he was on his knees, peeking under the stall doors. Panic surged through me. "Hey," I shouted, my voice cracking. The man's head snapped up. His face was partially hidden by the hood, but I could see his wide, unblinking eyes. At that exact moment, I heard a voice behind me. "Hey, what are you doing?" I spun around and saw Daniel standing further down the hall, waving at me with a confused look on his face. Relief washed over me, so fast I felt dizzy. I grabbed him and ran back to Lily. Together, we went straight to the front desk and told the teenage employee what had happened. The worker's face went pale. She quickly called the police and showed us and the officer's security footage of the man following us down the hall. We filed a police report that night. I don't like to think about what could have happened if Daniel had gone into that bathroom. Even if I had gotten there in time, I don't know how far things could have gone. It's been over a year now, and as far as I know, they never caught the man in the hoodie. Back in 2008, Cloverfield was one of the biggest movies of the year, and I was absolutely dying to see it. Most of my friends had already gone to see it together, which irritated me more than I'd like to admit. I didn't want to be the one seen walking into a movie theater alone, though. But on a Wednesday night, I decided I could probably get away with it. I didn't have work or school the next day, so I figured why not catch the late showing at one of the smaller, quieter theaters nearby? The film started at 9:30 p.m. Perfect. When I arrived, I immediately noticed how eerily empty the building felt. The parking lot only had a handful of cars, and when I stepped inside, there wasn't a single person in the lobby, not even behind a snack counter. It was dead silent, except for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. I bought my ticket at one of those self-serve kiosks and headed straight into the theater, telling myself it was probably normal for a weekday night. But when I entered the screening room, my stomach sank. The entire place was empty. Not one other person. There were two large seating sections, with an aisle splitting the lower rows from the upper ones. I chose to sit in the bottom row of the upper section, just behind a short wall. It felt like a safe spot. The movie began, and I tried to settle in. For a while, I was completely absorbed in the chaos on screen. But during the quieter moments, there weren't many of them, I started hearing something. It was faint at first, like whispers. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But the sound didn't stop. It seemed to be coming from behind me, somewhere in the shadows of the upper rows. I froze for a moment, my heart thudding in my chest. Then I slowly turned to glance behind me. Nothing. Nobody there. I tried to laugh it off, convincing myself it was just the movie playing tricks on my mind. But as the minutes ticked by, the whispers grew louder. More distinct. It wasn't the movie. I could hear words, though I couldn't make them out. I turned my head again. Still nothing. Just empty rows of chairs stretching into the darkness. I tried focusing back on a movie, but I could feel a prickling sensation crawl up the back of my neck. It felt like eyes were on me. Then, just as I was about to stand and leave, the whispering grew frantic, like someone was muttering 1,000 words a second in a deep, guttural voice. I bolted upright. I turned for one last look behind me, and that's when I saw it. A figure shot up from behind the seats, just 2 rows above me. It happened so fast, I barely had time to process what I was seeing. The figure stood stiff and straight, arms pinned tightly at its sides. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It was just staring at me. I couldn't even see its face clearly, just the vague outline of a head under the dim light of the projector. Panic surged through me like an electric shock. I didn't think, I ran. I bolted down the aisle, through the door, and back into the empty lobby. There wasn't a single employee in sight. Not a soul. I kept running. Out the front doors, across the parking lot, fumbling for my keys with trembling hands. Once I was in the car, I locked the doors, trying to catch my breath as my heart hammered like a drum. I sat there for a few seconds, staring at the entrance to the theater, expecting to see the figure step out. But nothing happened. I started the engine and sped off without looking back. Later that night, I tried calling the theater's number, just to hear a human voice, to convince myself there was some logical explanation. Nobody answered. The line just rang and rang. The next day, I didn't bother calling again. I tried to push the whole thing out of my mind, but even now, years later, I can still see that figure standing 2 rows above me, perfectly still, watching. One of my first jobs was working at a small movie theater in Huntington on Long Island. It wasn't a bad gig for a 16-year-old. Easy enough, and most nights were pretty quiet. But working there also meant dealing with the general public. And if you've ever worked with the public, you'll know there's no shortage of creeps. There was one creep, though, one experience so strange and unnerving that even now, years later, I still get chills thinking about it. It was a Monday night in early summer. The last 2 movies of the night were winding down, and since Mondays were slow, the place was set to close earlier than usual. Usually on weeknights, I'd be out of there by midnight. That night, I was the only one on duty aside from Claire, the woman behind the concession stand, who was finishing up and getting ready to leave. She yelled over to me from across the lobby, telling me to sweep the floors while she went to grab something from her car. I called back a lazy okay and started sweeping near the ticket podium. After a few minutes, I plopped down on the carpeted steps and pulled out my old flip phone to kill time with one of those Tetris-style games. It was quiet. Too quiet. I hated being left alone during closing shifts like this because it was the one time when my mind would wander to worst-case scenarios like some desperate guy barging in to rob the place. And just as I was thinking about that exact scenario, the front door to the theater yanked open with a sharp metallic screech. The sound made me jump. I froze, staring down the dim hallway that connected the lobby to the entrance, waiting for Claire to walk back through. But it wasn't Claire. Instead, a middle-aged man with thinning gray hair and a worn-out brown jacket shuffled into the lobby. His eyes locked onto mine instantly, and there was something about his gaze, hard and unblinking, that made my stomach knot up. I stood quickly and told him, "Sorry, sir, we're closed for the night. You'll have to come back tomorrow." He didn't answer right away. He just stood there, staring at me, his lips curling slightly into what might have been a smirk, or maybe just a twitch. Then, in a low, gravelly voice, he mumbled, "Is Claire here?" I shook my head and replied, "No, she's not around right now." His response sent a chill down my spine. "I'll just sit over there for a little while." Before I could say anything, he shuffled over to a bench in the lobby and sat down heavily, never taking his eyes off me. My heart was pounding. I hated confrontations, and I didn't have the nerve to demand that he leave. I sat back down on the step, pretending to be absorbed in my phone, but in reality, I was frantically typing out a message to Claire. "There's some guy here asking for you. Really weird. Come back soon." With my old flip phone, every letter felt like it took forever to type. I hit send and prayed she'd check her phone right away. When I glanced up again, the man was still staring at me. Unnerved, I stood and walked to a different bench in the lobby, positioning myself behind a wall so I couldn't see him anymore, and more importantly, so he couldn't see me. But within minutes, I realized how stupid that was. Hiding from someone like that only gave them an opportunity to do whatever they wanted. I got up and returned to the steps by the podium. But when I looked back over at the bench where he had been sitting, he was gone. Panic surged through me. I scanned the lobby and the hallways, but there was no sign of him. Just then, Claire walked back into the theater, holding her keys and a soda. Relieved, I hurried over and told her everything. Her face paled as I described the man. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I think I know who that was." She admitted she'd accidentally left the front door unlocked when she left earlier. She didn't say much else, though. I tried to shake off the unease as we wrapped up the night. Claire asked me to bring the mop bucket and broom down to the storage room before heading out. I nodded and took the cleaning supplies down the dim, concrete stairs that led to the storage area. The air down there felt damp and heavy, and the single overhead light flickered faintly. As I turned the corner near one of the large boilers, I froze. There, partially hidden in the shadows, I saw an arm. A man's arm. It was him. He was crouched in the corner, trying to make himself as small as possible, clearly waiting for something or someone. I didn't say a word. I didn't even let on that I had seen him. I turned calmly and walked back up the stairs, shutting and locking the storage room door behind me. Then I sprinted over to Claire. "There's someone down there," I whispered sharply. Claire's eyes widened. We rushed to the security office to check the cameras, and what we saw made my stomach flip. On the footage, the man could be seen walking out of the theater while I was texting Claire earlier. "That's my ex-husband," Claire said suddenly, her voice tight. I stared at her, my mind racing. She quickly pulled out her phone and dialed his number, but after a few rings, he picked up and immediately hung up. Her hands began to tremble as she called the police. Through choked words, she explained that her ex-husband had been threatening her for months, and that tonight, he may not have come alone. We hurried outside to wait. Within minutes, 2 squad cars came speeding into the lot, their sirens cutting through the night air. They stormed the theater, and moments later, 2 officers emerged, dragging an older man in cuffs. He looked like he belonged in a mob movie, grizzled, heavy-set, and wearing that same warm brown jacket. Claire never showed up for work again after that night. And as for her ex-husband, I never found out what became of him. All I know is that if I had gone into that corner of the storage room, if I'd said anything to him, I might not have made it out alive.